Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm here from the Chicago chapter of Cloud Security Alliance, and we're going to talk a little bit about the cloud, PRISM, and you. So a quick background on the Cloud Security Alliance. We're a global organization. It's a nonprofit organization, and our mission in life is to promote trust in the cloud. So we've got about 49,000 members internationally, 70 chapters internationally. We have a global organization, but really we're also a very grassroots type organization. So why is Cloud Security Alliance here talking about PRISM? Well, again, we promote trust in the cloud, and as you all may or may not be aware, there are trust issues in the cloud. So these trust issues, they're not just related to PRISM and government surveillance. We run into this every day of our life, right? We eat, sleep, and live and breathe the trust issues. There's privacy issues, security issues, transparency issues. So what we're doing, we ask the question of our members, is there a government trust issue? So we at Cloud Security Alliance, given that there's all these trust issues in the cloud, we like to think of ourselves as your therapist, right? So we want to ask the questions, address the topics, and help facilitate those conversations to further promote, again, trust in the cloud. So we're all aware of the issues that have come up in the news, right? There's obviously a lot of topics and incidents of surveillance of citizens, maybe innocent citizens. We're seeing potential reports of abuse. One of the challenges associated with a lot of surveillance that we see on a day-to-day basis is there's no standards governing this type of request for access to information. We've also seen, obviously, potential broken cryptography. We're not quite sure if there's backdoors. There's really no data retention rules, right? So we know that our data is being collected as consumers, but we don't know what. We don't know how long it's being stored, and there's really no oversight right now. So what we did is we asked all of our corporate sponsors, members, and folks actively engaged with CSA, we asked some questions. We conducted a survey. This was shortly after kind of the Snowden news broke. And we received about 456 responses. About half were from the US, and 138 from Europe, and 36 from Asia Pac. So we got a pretty good representation of global responses. This presentation will be made available, so you're welcome to go look at the full report. So the first question we asked was, specifically of non-US residents, does the Snowden incident make your company more or less likely to use US-based providers? So the interesting point about this is that 56% said less likely. And you're going to see a common theme as I run through these numbers. There is a significant portion of folks and respondents that, these surveillance issues are actually a concern. So that's kind of what I want to highlight throughout this presentation. The next question we asked is we asked this of US residents specifically, does it make it more difficult for you to conduct business outside of the US as a US company or provider? And 36% said yes, it will make it more difficult. The other question is in regards to transparency of government access. So how would you rate your country's processes to obtain user information for the purpose of investigations, et cetera? 47% of the folks said poor. So there actually is a really interesting Cloud Bytes podcast that was provided by the Cloud Security Alliance, where we had a number of attorneys that speak to other countries and other geographical areas, their processes. And it was interesting because some of them actually even said that Europe or Asia Pac is there's much less oversight, and they can essentially request whatever they want. So if you get a chance, find that Cloud Bytes, and I think you'll get some good perspective. But To some degree, this might be a case of a lack of oversight, in many areas, not just the U.S. So the next question we asked about is, should companies who have been subpoenaed be able to publish aggregate data of the results and the response to that? And 91, overwhelmingly, everybody said yes. So an example of what that means and what we're talking about is the report that Google provides of what requests they've received from what countries. This is kind of an interesting stat. If you just look at the U.S., we have 8,438 requests and responses for the U.S. as compared to significantly smaller numbers from other countries. So one of the things, this is a quote from the chief legal counsel at Google. Essentially, he's calling for more transparency and really wants to be able to publish these reports and not be limited by the government. So that's kind of one of the hot topics, is the transparency in the requests and the reporting. And there's many that believe publishing aggregate data is not going to affect our homeland security. So when we're talking about collecting or requesting this data, things that us as consumers and even perhaps providers, enterprise, what we need to think about is a couple things. The main points is, number one, metadata is important. So when you hear reports that say, well, it's just metadata, don't worry about it, no, metadata actually does have meaning, and there are sort of ways to profile individuals, locations, et cetera. So I wouldn't disregard the concept of metadata. The other is data minimization principles, right? So with all security and trust type issues, we always try to minimize the data that we collect as well as what we store. The other point is transparency of the actors, namely, obviously, the government and the providers, right? We want to know what they're doing. We want to have some insight into that process. And then where transparency is not feasible, we want to see some oversight, right? And I think that that's come up a number of times, whether it be congressional oversight or, whomever it is, some third party. But at the end of the day, if we can't see what's happening, we want to know that somebody's watching. So what is Cloud Security Alliance doing to help increase the trust in the cloud? So we've been talking about this topic. Obviously, I'm here to address all of you. We'll be talking about it at the CSA Congress in Orlando in December. We published the survey, conducted the survey and published it, so that's freely available to you. And we also will be doing a follow-up survey. I'm not quite sure exactly what the topics will be or when that's going to be released, but that will be made available. We do a lot of research in this space. We have something like 30 different individual working groups, much of which address trust and transparency in the cloud. We also act as informal advisors to the government. But really what our goal in life is to raise awareness of these issues and create dialogue through the parties, right? So we want to hear from all of you in the room. We want to facilitate these conversations. We want to ask the tough questions, and we want to help. We want to help facilitate the solutions to, again, further promote trust in the cloud, not just from a surveillance standpoint, but from a privacy, security, and governance standpoint. So if everyone's not aware, CSA, Cloud Security Alliance, provides a number of freely available tools. And these tools, you can go to our website and obtain yourself and use them, whether you're a provider or a consumer. If you're a consumer, you can use them to assess your provider. If you're a provider, we strongly encourage you to adopt our framework and take a close look at the controls and adopt the controls. So what's next and what do we all have to do? I think one of the messages that I would like, if you take nothing away from this, is somewhat of a call to arms, right? We all have a role to play, whether you're government, industry, or the enterprise. Each one of us has to take some degree of action get involved and participate. From a government standpoint, obviously we have to ask questions. How do we treat citizens, versus non-US citizens? I think that we really need to align the surveillance topic with some of the globally accepted standards, whether it's ISO, CSF, et cetera, NIST, whatever. From an industry standpoint, what would be ideal is if the providers and the industry can build the technology to make the policy a non-issue, right? So what does that mean? If the government says, well, I need to request this data and I have to have all of it because of ABC, well, let's build the technology so that we can give them exactly what they need, and we don't have to over-policy it, but we're not sort of overextending what's being requested. And then, from an enterprise standpoint, I see this a lot in my day-to-day job where I don't think the enterprises are asking enough questions of their providers. So again, going back to the concept of trust and transparency, from an enterprise standpoint, we ask that you all question your providers, understand their process, and ensure that they provide you with a degree of trust and transparency in what they're doing with your data. And that's all we have, so thank you very much.